He was a legend, a god in scrubs, but his hands were shaking. In the center of the world's most advanced operating room, with a child's life on the line, the great Dr. Sterling was coming apart. The rookie nurse, Anna, was just a shadow in the corner, a target for the chief surgeon's frustrated insults. "Can you even hear me, girl? Or are you as useless as you look?" he'd snarled moments before. But as the monitors screamed and the pressure became unbearable, it wasn't the rookie who broke. It was the god. Dr. Sterling's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed, hitting the floor with a thud that silenced the room. Panic ignited. A life was fading on the table. In that moment of chaos, a quiet, steady voice emerged. "I've got this." Every eye turned to the insignificant rookie nurse as she moved toward the table, her timid demeanor replaced by an aura of absolute command. They were about to witness the impossible. The air in Operating Theater 1 was cold, sterile, and thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the temperature. It was the flagship surgical suite of the Metropolitan General Hospital, a room where miracles were manufactured and reputations were forged in steel and blood. Above, behind a wide pane of polarized glass, a handful of observers, visiting fellows and two anxious-looking hospital administrators, watched the scene unfold like a silent, sacred play. On the table, beneath a sea of sterile blue drapes, lay the 7-year-old daughter of a tech billionaire. Her heart, a fragile, fist-sized muscle, was failing, and the procedure to save it was a labyrinth of microscopic sutures and impossibly delicate maneuvers. Presiding over this domain was Dr. Richard Sterling. His silver-streaked hair and chiseled features had graced the covers of medical journals and talk shows. He was a titan, a pioneer in pediatric cardiothoracic surgery, and he cultivated an aura of divine infallibility. His voice, accustomed to being the only one that mattered, cut through the low, rhythmic beeping of the vital signs monitor. "Scalpel. And for God's sake, have the tin blade ready before I have to ask for it. This is an amateur hour." His command was directed not at one person, but at the room itself. Yet, the venom in it seemed to find a specific target, Anna Oliveira. Standing near the instrument table, she was the newest addition to the surgical nursing team, a rookie in a room full of veterans. While the other nurses moved with a familiar, almost bored efficiency, Anna moved with the quiet reverence of someone entering a temple. She was invisible, and that's how she preferred it. Her focus was absolute, her eyes constantly scanning the array of gleaming steel, anticipating the flow of the surgery 3 steps ahead. This quiet diligence was, to head nurse Carla Rossi, a sign of abject terror. Carla, a woman whose authority was etched into the permanent scowl on her face, saw Anna as a liability. "Oliveira," she snapped, her voice a harsh whisper that carried across the room. "Stop staring and start being useful." Wipe Dr. Sterling's brow. "Can't you see he's concentrating?" Anna moved without a word, dabbing the surgeon's forehead with a sterile cloth. Sterling didn't acknowledge her, flinching slightly as if her touch were an annoyance. As she retreated, Dr. Evan Black, the surgical resident eager to climb the hospital's slippery hierarchy, saw his opening. He smirked from across the table. "Easy there, Carla. You might scare her off. She looks like she's about to bolt." Carla's lips tightened into a cruel smile. "As if. This new generation, they're all the same. Read 1,000 books, but have no idea how to function in the real world. Useless." The insult hung in the air, sharp and clean. Anna gave no reaction. Her face remained a placid mask, her gaze returning to the instrument tray. She had heard it all before, in every rotation, in every new clinical setting. Her silence, her refusal to engage, was always mistaken for weakness. They didn't see the gears turning behind her eyes, the way she was mapping the patient's arterial pathways in her mind, cross-referencing them with the pre-op scans she had studied for 12 hours straight the night before. They didn't see her mentally rehearsing every possible complication and the corresponding protocol to fix it. They just saw a plain, quiet girl in scrubs that were a size too big. The surgery progressed. Sterling was a master, his movements precise and economical. But the child's anatomy was anomalous, a cruel twist of genetics that made the textbook procedure nearly impossible. A small, unexpected bleed, a tiny vessel no scan could have predicted, suddenly obscured the field. It wasn't a crisis, not for a surgeon of his caliber, but it was a complication. And Sterling did not tolerate complications. His focus wavered, replaced by a simmering frustration. Suction. Now. Don't just stand there gawking, he barked, his eyes darting around. The pressure in the room ratcheted up. The observers in the gallery leaned forward. Forceps, Oliveira. Right angle, Carla commanded, pointing a gloved finger at the tray. Anna's hand moved instantly, selecting the instrument and placing it firmly into Carla's waiting palm. Carla then slapped it into Sterling's hand. He grumbled, manipulating the tiny vessel. This is taking too long. The cross-clamp time is extending. Black, what do you see? Tissue looks fragile, sir, Evan offered, trying to sound insightful. I can see that, you imbecile, Sterling retorted, his voice dangerously low. I don't need a running commentary. He worked for another minute, his movements becoming slightly more aggressive. The bleed was contained, but the atmosphere was ruined. The smooth rhythm was gone, replaced by his jagged frustration. He tossed the forceps onto the tray with a clatter. This is what happens when the support staff isn't properly prepared. It throws off the entire operation. His glare swept over the nurses, lingering for a moment on Anna. I need a 5-0 proline suture. And I need it yesterday. Anna already had it ready. She had seen the microsurgical repair he was planning before he had even asked. She held it out. Sterling snatched it from her hand, his gloved fingers brushing hers with a dismissive roughness. Useless. Can't you do anything right, he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. It's like working with children. Dr. Black chuckled softly, a sycophantic sound. The administrators in the gallery shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, a flicker of something, not anger, but a deep, wearying sadness, crossed Anna's face before she smoothed it away. She simply picked up the discarded forceps and wiped them clean, her movements slow and deliberate. No one noticed the single bead of sweat that trickled down Dr. Sterling's temple, right past the spot she had just wiped. And no one, except Anna, saw the almost imperceptible tremor that started in his left hand as he struggled to thread the impossibly fine needle through the tissue of the child's heart. The tremor was the tell. To anyone else, it was an insignificant twitch, a muscle spasm born of hours spent hunched over a tiny, beating heart. But to Anna, it was a seismic event. She saw it propagate from his fingertips up his forearm, a fine, high-frequency vibration that betrayed a catastrophic loss of control. Dr. Sterling was a machine, and the machine was breaking down. He tried to compensate, bracing his wrist against the edge of the incision, but it only made the tremor more obvious. The fine tip of the needle holder danced erratically, microns away from tearing the delicate aortic tissue. Damn this lighting, Sterling hissed, a flimsy excuse that fooled no one, least of all himself. It's like operating in a cave. Black, are you just going to stand there? Give me some retraction. I need to see. Evan Black, startled, fumbled with a retractor, his movements clumsy and uncertain. He was a follower, a good soldier, but he had no idea how to lead or how to improvise. The panic was beginning to creep into his eyes. Yes, sir. Right away, sir. Seeing Sterling's mounting distress, Carla Rossi's instinct was to find a scapegoat, and her eyes landed once again on Anna. Oliveira, you're crowding him. Back up. Give the man some air, she commanded, her voice sharp with misplaced anger. Your hovering is distracting. Go check the fluid levels. Make yourself useful somewhere else. Anna took one step back, but her eyes never left the surgical field. She didn't look at the fluid bags. She was watching the patient's arterial pressure on the monitor, watching it dip precariously. She saw the slight cyanotic tinge on the child's lips, a sign of decreasing oxygenation. The clamp time was becoming critical. Sterling's breakdown was no longer just a personal failure, it was starving the child's brain of oxygen. Her mind was a whirlwind of calculations. She subtly shifted a tray of emergency cardiac drugs closer to the anesthesiologist. She quietly repositioned the internal defibrillator paddles, ensuring they were within immediate reach. Each action was small, discreet, and utterly invisible to the drama unfolding around the table. They looked like the mundane tidying of a junior nurse. In reality, they were the preparations of a field marshal readying for a battle no one else knew was coming. I can't see the suture line," Sterling stammered. His voice, usually a booming command, was now a strained, desperate whisper. The god in scrubs was suddenly, terrifyingly mortal. He lifted his head, his eyes behind his surgical loops wide with a primal fear. "It's too blurry." "Sir?" Dr. Black asked, his own voice trembling. "Dr. Sterling, are you all right?" The question hung in the air, a stunning breach of the unwritten rule that one never questioned Dr. Sterling's stamina. For a moment, the entire room froze. The only sound was the frantic, accelerating beep of the heart monitor. Sterling tried to respond, to lash out with his usual biting sarcasm, but no words came. His breath hitched. The tremor in his hand became a violent shake, causing the needle holder to fall from his grasp. It hit the sterile drapes with a soft, muffled clink that sounded as loud as a gunshot in the silent room. And then he collapsed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand, theatrical fall. His body simply gave out. His knees buckled, and he crumpled sideways, his descent cushioned by a quick-thinking anesthesiologist who broke his fall before he hit the hard tile floor. Chaos erupted. "Code blue! Code blue in or one!" Carla screamed into the intercom, her voice cracking with panic. She immediately abandoned the patient, rushing to Sterling's side. "Get a gurney. Someone page cardiology, stat." Dr. Black stood paralyzed, his gloved hands hovering uselessly over the open chest cavity of the child. His face was ashen. The weight of the world had just landed on his shoulders, and he was crumbling under it. "Oh God! Oh my God!" he whispered, staring at the abyss of the surgical wound. The observers in the gallery were on their feet, their faces a mixture of horror and disbelief. The two hospital administrators were already on their phones, their expressions grim. This was a disaster of unprecedented scale. The heart monitor let out a long, piercing, continuous wail as the child's heart rate plummeted into arrhythmia. They were losing her. "What do we do?" a circulating nurse cried out, her voice frantic. "We have to close her up." "We can't." Black stammered, his eyes wide with terror. "The repair isn't finished. If we close her, she'll die. If we move her, she'll die. What do we do?" The room was a vortex of panic, a symphony of alarms and terrified shouts. No one was in charge. No one knew what to do. The child on the table had seconds left. Then, through the cacophony, a single, calm voice cut through the noise like a scalpel. It was quiet, yet it commanded the attention of the entire room. "I've got this. Hey, before we witness what happens next, can I ask you a quick favor? We are at a critical moment, where a quiet voice just cut through absolute chaos. This is a story about the strength that goes unseen, about the hero that nobody saw coming. If you're on the edge of your seat and you believe in that kind of power, please take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep sharing stories like Anna's, stories that prove that sometimes, the person everyone underestimates is the only one who can save the day. Thanks for your support. Now, let's not keep them waiting. For a full 3 seconds, the only response to Anna's quiet declaration was the frantic symphony of the alarms. The words "I've got this" seemed to hang in the air, an absurdity in a moment of such catastrophic failure. The staff, caught in a whirlwind of panic, stared at her as if she had suddenly sprouted a second head. She was the quiet one, the rookie, the glorified gopher who fetched instruments and wiped brows. The statement was so audacious, so utterly disconnected from their reality of her, that their brains couldn't immediately process it. Carla Rossi, who was helping the staff move Dr. Sterling onto a gurney, was the first to find her voice. She whipped her head around, her face a mask of furious disbelief. Oliveira, have you lost your mind? She shrieked, her voice echoing in the tiled room. This is not a drill. Get away from that table and help us with Dr. Sterling. You are a nurse. From his position of frozen terror at the table, Dr. Evan Black could only stammer. Anna, what are you doing? You can't. That's insane. He was the resident. If anyone was to step up, it was him, and his own paralysis made her calm seem like a personal indictment. But Anna didn't hear them. Or if she did, she gave no sign. The timid, deferential girl who had walked into the OR that morning was gone. In her place stood someone else entirely. Her back, once slightly stooped in a posture of subservience, was now ramrod straight. She moved to the head of the table, to the spot Sterling had just vacated, with a fluid, predatory grace. She kicked the height pedal of Sterling's stool down a few inches to adjust for her smaller frame and settled into position. Her eyes, no longer avoiding contact, were ablaze with an intensity that was terrifying and mesmerizing. They scanned the full bank of monitors, absorbing every frantic line and number, her mind processing the data at an inhuman speed. Then she began to speak, and the voice that emerged was not the whisper they were used to. It was calm, clear, and radiated an absolute, unquestionable authority. Anesthesiology, she said, her gaze locking with the wide-eyed doctor at the head of the bed. The patient is in VFib. I need 1 milligram of epinephrine, for push, right now. And start a dopamine drip at 5 micrograms per kilogram per minute. Her pressure is non-existent. The anesthesiologist, a 30-year veteran named Dr. Miles, hesitated for a single, crucial heartbeat, his mind warring between protocol and the sheer insanity of taking orders from a junior nurse. But her diagnosis was instant and accurate. Her orders were textbook perfect. He nodded, his hands already moving. AP going in. Circulating nurse, Anna continued, her head not moving. Get the internal paddles charged to 20 joules and hand them to me. On my count. Dr. Black, she said, her tone sharpening slightly. Her eyes met his over the surgical field. The condescending resident wilted under her gaze. Stop panicking and become a surgeon. Pick up the suction. I need you to clear the pericardial space right here, she pointed with a slight nod of her chin. And I need you to keep your hand steady, or so help me God, I will have you removed. The command was so potent, so laced with steel, that Black flinched and obeyed on pure instinct. He grabbed the suction tool, his movement still shaky, but he did as she said. Up in the observation gallery, chaos reigned. The hospital administrators were pale, speaking in frantic whispers into their phones. But one man was perfectly still. Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a legendary semi-retired cardiothoracic surgeon from Japan, was visiting the hospital as a consultant. He had been a mentor to Sterling years ago and had come to watch his old student perform. While the others saw a disaster, Dr. Tanaka leaned forward, his elbows on the railing, his dark eyes narrowed in intense concentration. He watched Anna, not as a nurse, but as a commander seizing control. He heard her clipped, precise commands through the gallery's intercom. My God, he whispered to the terrified administrator beside him, his voice filled with a strange reverence. Who is that woman? That's just a new nurse, the administrator stammered. This is a nightmare. No, Tanaka said, his eyes never leaving Anna. That is not just a nurse. Her stabilization protocol is flawless. She is 3 steps ahead of the arrhythmia. Look. Down below, Anna held out her hand. Paddles. They were placed in her hands. Clear, she announced. Everyone instinctively leaned back. She placed the paddles directly onto the surface of the child's tiny, quivering heart and delivered the shock. The small body on the table jolted. For a moment, the chaotic line on the ECG monitor was flat. A collective gasp filled the room. Then, a beep. Followed by another. And another. A slow, steady rhythm appeared on the screen. Sinus rhythm. The alarms fell silent, leaving a ringing void in their wake. The room was still. Every single person was staring at Anna. She had just pulled the patient back from the brink of death, a feat that would have taken a full crash team minutes to achieve. She had done it in seconds. She dropped the paddles into a basin, her hand already reaching out. "Give me the 5-0 proline." Sterling dropped. "And a DeBakey forceps." Evan Black, his mouth agape, watched as she took the delicate needle holder. The way she held it was wrong. It was all wrong for a nurse. She didn't hold it with the careful, functional grip of an assistant. She held it like an extension of her own body, a familiar tool, her fingers resting with an intimacy that spoke of 1,000 hours of practice. With a single, fluid movement that was faster than anything Black had ever seen, even from Sterling, she placed a perfect, microscopic stitch into the torn aortic tissue, the very stitch that had caused Sterling to break. Her hands were perfectly, unnaturally still. The tremor of the god was replaced by the serenity of a master. The entire room, from the head nurse frozen by the door to the legend watching from the gallery above, held its breath. The single stitch hung in the silent room, a testament to an impossible reality. It was perfect. More than perfect, it was elegant. Dr. Black stared at it, his mind struggling to reconcile the action with the actor. He had watched Dr. Sterling, a man with 30 years of experience, tremble and fail at that exact spot. And this nurse, this girl he had mocked not 10 minutes ago, had performed it with the casual grace of someone tying a shoelace. Anna didn't wait for this shock to subside. She was in a different state of being now, a place of pure, unadulterated focus where the chaos of the room didn't exist. There was only the child's heart, the gleaming steel in her hands, and the intricate anatomical map that existed in her mind's eye. "Next suture," she said, her voice never rising, her hand already extended. A nurse, jolted from her stupor, slapped the instrument into her palm. And then, the performance began. It wasn't surgery, not in the way Evan Black understood it. Surgery was a methodical, often brutal, process of cutting and sewing. What Anna was doing was art. Her hands didn't move, they flowed. They danced across the surgical field in a blur of motion, a symphony of precise, economical movements. She worked with a speed that was breathtaking, placing stitch after stitch with microscopic accuracy. There was no hesitation, no wasted energy. She was anticipating the tissue's response, the flow of blood, the tension of the suture, all at once. "She's not following Dr. Sterling's surgical plan," Black whispered, the words escaping his lips without his permission. He was right. Anna was deviating, improvising. She had seen a more efficient, more elegant path to the repair, a shortcut through the anatomical labyrinth that was both brilliant and terrifyingly risky. It required a level of spatial awareness and anatomical knowledge that was superhuman. "Forceps," she commanded, and Black, now her de facto assistant, moved to comply. His own hands, which had been shaking uncontrollably moments before, were now steady, his panic replaced by a profound sense of awe. He was no longer a surgeon in his own right, he was an apprentice, a witness to a masterclass he couldn't possibly comprehend. He found himself trying to anticipate her next move, but she was always light years ahead, asking for an instrument he hadn't even considered, for a reason he wouldn't understand until 3 moves later. Near the doorway, Carla Rossi stood rooted to the spot. The gurney carrying the unconscious form of her idol, Dr. Sterling, had long since disappeared down the hall, but she hadn't moved. Her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, her face pale. Every principle her rigid, hierarchical world was built upon had been shattered. Competence wasn't about titles or years of experience. It wasn't about a booming voice or an intimidating presence. It was right there, in the quiet, fluid movements of the rookie she had dismissed as useless. She watched as Anna used a left-handed knot-tying technique, a notoriously difficult maneuver used for tight spaces, and did it faster than most surgeons could with their dominant hand. A wave of cold shame washed over Carla. It wasn't just that she had misjudged Anna. It was that she had been actively cruel to someone who was, undeniably, her superior in every way that mattered. Up in the gallery, Dr. Tanaka was narrating the miracle to the now silent administrators. "Look at that," he said, pointing a single, steady finger at the screen displaying the close-up of the surgery. "She's using a modified U-stitch. It distributes tension across the tissue, minimizing the risk of tearing. It's a technique primarily used in aortic valve replacements, but to apply it here, on a pediatric patient, it's unheard of. The level of finesse required is extraordinary. The administrator next to him, a man named Henderson, finally spoke. Where did she come from? Her file says she graduated from a state nursing school, top of her class, but that's it. Tanaka shook his head slowly, a faint, incredulous smile on his lips. This is not something you learn in a school, Mr. Henderson. Not any school I know of. This is a gift. A once-in-a-generation talent. We are not watching a nurse. We are watching a prodigy. Back in the OR, the atmosphere had transformed. The frantic edge was gone, replaced by a hushed, almost holy reverence. The staff moved around Anna in a silent, coordinated dance. They had found a new center of gravity. The steady, rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound, a metronome marking the time of her masterpiece. Anna was approaching the final, most dangerous part of the reconstruction, the reimplantation of the coronary arteries. It was the Everest of this procedure, a step where a single misplaced stitch, a millimeter in any direction, meant instant and irreversible failure. Microscalpel, Anna said, her voice a whisper. Dr. Black placed it in her hand, his own hand trembling slightly, this time not from fear, but from the vicarious thrill of what he was about to witness. Anna took a single, slow breath, paused for a fraction of a second, and prepared to make the first incision. The entire room seemed to lean in, holding its breath with her. The tip of the microscalpel hovered over the child's heart. The operating room had become a vacuum, all sound, all motion sucked into the tiny space where Anna was about to work. The coronary arteries, the vessels she had to detach and reattach, were fragile, thread-like structures, smaller in diameter than the lead of a pencil. To suture them required a touch so delicate, a vision so precise, it bordered on the supernatural. Up in the gallery, Dr. Tanaka leaned so far forward he was nearly pressed against the glass. He spoke, not to anyone in particular, but to the moment itself, his voice a hushed, reverent whisper. This is the test. Everything up to now was mere control. This is creation. Anna made the incision. It was a single, perfect stroke, infinitesimally shallow, impossibly precise. Then she began to work with a focus that was absolute. Her world shrank to the magnified field visible through her surgical loops. Under the intense lights, her hands, steady as granite, began the intricate process of suturing with needles so fine they were nearly invisible, on a tissue that was in constant, gentle motion with the rhythm of the bypass machine. Dr. Black watched, mesmerized. He was so close he could see every detail. He saw that she wasn't just stitching. She was sculpting. She subtly altered the angle of the artery's new connection, a minute adjustment of a few degrees that wasn't in any textbook. He realized with a jolt of insight that she was planning for the child's future growth, ensuring the artery wouldn't kink or stretch as her heart grew. It was a level of forethought that was breathtakingly brilliant. His own ego, his ambition, his arrogance, it all dissolved in the face of this silent, stunning display of genius. He was no longer a doctor in a prestigious residency, he was a privileged spectator with the best seat in the house. Each stitch was a tiny miracle. The work was agonizingly slow, yet her hands moved with an unerring speed. The minutes stretched on, marked only by the steady beat of the bypass pump. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she placed the last suture on the second artery. She tied the final, microscopic knot with a flick of her wrist and trimmed the thread. It was done. The reconstruction was complete. But the true test remained. Anna looked up from the loops for the first time, her eyes clear. Prepare to remove the aortic cross-clamp, she announced. A palpable wave of tension swept the room. This was the moment of truth. The moment they would find out if her masterpiece was a living work of art or a beautiful, tragic failure. Once the clamp was removed, the child's heart would be flooded with blood and would have to start beating on its own. Removing clamp, she said, her voice steady. Her hand reached for the instrument, and with a soft click, the clamp was released. Silence. Every eye was fixed on the heart monitor. For 1, 2, 3 agonizing seconds, the ECG line remained flat. A nurse stifled a sob. Carla Rossi's hands flew to her mouth, her knuckles white. And then, a flicker. A single, beautiful spike on the screen. Beep. The heart contracted. It was a weak, fluttering beat, but it was there. Beep. Beep. Another beat, stronger this time. The heart, bathed in fresh, oxygenated blood, was waking up. The dusky, grayish tissue began to blush, turning a vibrant, healthy pink. Beep. 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 The rhythm steadied, falling into a strong, perfect, glorious cadence. The blood pressure numbers on the monitor, which had been dangerously low, climbed steadily into the healthy range. It was a perfect success. A miracle woven from silk and steel by the hands of a girl no one believed in. A collective, shuddering sigh of relief went through the room. Dr. Black felt his knees go weak, and he had to grip the edge of the operating table to stay upright. Tears were openly streaming down the face of the anesthesiologist. From the gallery, Dr. Tanaka slowly sat back in his chair, a look of profound, overwhelming awe on his face. He had just witnessed the single greatest display of surgical skill in his 50-year career. Anna watched the monitors for another 30 seconds, her expression calm, analytical, as if simply confirming an expected result. She inspected her work one last time, a field of impossibly neat suture lines that had saved a life. Then, she did something that shocked them more than the surgery itself. She placed her instruments down on the tray with a quiet finality. She pushed her stool back, stood up, and took a single step away from the table. The commander, the prodigy, the savior, vanished as quickly as she had appeared. She looked at the stunned resident, and the quiet, humble voice they all knew returned. "Dr. Black," she said softly. "The repair is complete and stable. You can close the chest." And with that, Ana Oliveira, the rookie nurse, turned to the side table and began to silently clean her instruments, her movements once again simple, efficient, and completely invisible. The room was left in a state of stunned, reverent silence, forever changed by the storm that had just passed through. The silence that followed Anna's final command was profound. It was heavier than the exhaustion that suddenly settled on the room, thicker than the lingering scent of antiseptic. Dr. Black stood over the patient, the simple, almost mundane task of closing the chest feeling like the most sacred duty he had ever performed. His hands, which had once been instruments of his own ambition, now moved with a newfound reverence, each stitch a prayer of penance. He was closing the wound, but he knew that something inside of him had been opened up, raw and exposed, and would never be the same. As he worked, the other staff began to move, but their movements were different. The usual post-op hustle was replaced by a slow, deliberate quiet. They all orbited the still figure of Anna, who was wiping down stainless steel instruments with a methodical calm, as if she had done nothing more than assist in a routine appendectomy. The first to approach her was Dr. Miles, the veteran anesthesiologist. He pulled down his surgical mask, revealing a face etched with the lines of 1,000 crises. His eyes, however, held a look of utter novelty. "Nurse Oliveira," he said, his voice raspy with emotion. "I have been in this profession for 35 years. I have worked with the best surgeons on this continent. And I can tell you, without any exaggeration, I have never seen anything like what you just did." He paused, shaking his head slowly. "Ever. Thank you." Anna looked up, her expression placid. She offered him a small, tired nod. "We saved her," she said softly, her use of we a gentle deflection, an offering of shared credit that she didn't need to give. "That's all that matters." Just then, Carla Rossi walked towards her, her steps hesitant. Her usual rigid posture was gone, replaced by a slump of defeat. Her face, stripped of its customary sneer, looked bare and vulnerable. "Oliveira. She began, her voice cracking. She struggled for words, her mind a maelstrom of shock and profound, gut-wrenching shame. "What you did in there. I have never. I was." Anna stopped wiping a retractor and looked directly at her. She offered no malice, no "I told you so." Instead, she gave her something far more disarming, grace. "You can call me Anna," she said, her voice even. "And you reacted quickly to get Dr. Sterling the help he needed. You did your job." She then turned back to her instruments, the conversation, for her, clearly over. The simple absolution was a heavier blow to Carla's pride than any reprimand could have been. It left no room for argument, no space for defense, only the cold, hard truth of her own failure of character. By the time Dr. Black had placed the final suture, his transformation was complete. He approached Anna, his head bowed, the swagger of the ambitious resident replaced by the quiet humility of a student. "Anna," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "There are no words. I am so sorry. For everything I said, for how I acted. You are a genius. That's the only word for it." Anna looked at his hands. "You kept them steady when it mattered, doctor," she replied, her gaze meeting his. "That's what a surgeon does." In that single sentence, she both acknowledged his role and gently handed him back a piece of the dignity he had so carelessly thrown away. As the team prepared to wheel the stable patient to the ICU, the pneumatic doors to the OR hissed open with an unusual urgency. Dr. Tanaka and the hospital administrator, Mr. Henderson, strode in, a stark violation of sterile protocol that underscored the gravity of the moment. Henderson looked flustered, his eyes wide as he zeroed in on Anna. "Miss Oliveira, we need to talk. I have to make a report to the board. Your statement will be crucial. We need to frame this correctly. We can spin this." "Be silent," a voice commanded. It was Dr. Tanaka. He cut off the administrator with a glare that could have melted steel. He walked directly to Anna, bypassing everyone else. He stopped a respectful distance from her and performed a deep, formal bow, an act of profound deference that stunned the entire room. "It is a profound honor to meet you," Tanaka said, his English precise and formal. He looked at her hands, then at her eyes. "I must ask, who was your teacher? I have only ever seen that specific suturing technique, the way you anticipate the tissue's memory, the way you tie off under tension without bruising the vessel wall, once before in my life. From the late Dr. Isao Nishimura." A flicker of memory, of a distant past, warmed Anna's eyes. A quiet smile touched her lips for the first time. "He was my grandfather's friend," she said simply. "He taught me how to watch. How to be still and see the patterns." The answer, both simple and yet explaining everything, hung in the air. Henderson, seeing his narrative slipping away, stepped forward again. "Miss Oliveira, your contract, we need to discuss your position here. A promotion, a new title, whatever you want." Anna paid him no mind. She looked at the clock on the wall. She untied her surgical gown, rolled it into a bundle, and dropped it into the receptacle. "My shift is over," she said to no one in particular. And then, without another word, she walked out of the operating room, leaving a trail of shattered egos, humbled professionals, and the legend of her quiet, terrifying brilliance in her wake. The story of what happened in Operating Theater 1 did not stay contained within its sterile walls. It spread through the hospital like a wildfire, whispered in hallways, discussed in hushed tones in the cafeteria, and recounted with a sense of mythic awe. The official report, carefully worded by Mr. Henderson, was clinical and dry, but the truth was far more compelling and traveled much faster. And with the truth came the reckoning. Dr. Richard Sterling recovered from what was diagnosed as a transient ischemic attack brought on by acute stress. He was physically cleared to return to work within a week, but he would never set foot in an operating room again. The legend of his infallibility was shattered, replaced by the humiliating reality of his collapse. More damaging, however, was the floodgate Anna's quiet heroism had opened. Empowered by her example, other nurses and residents came forward with stories of Sterling's years of verbal abuse, his temper, and the toxic environment he cultivated. Facing a full-blown internal investigation and the threat of public scandal, the hospital board offered him a choice: a quiet, immediate, and permanent retirement, or a very loud and public termination. He took the retirement. The titan of surgery faded into obscurity, his legacy not one of brilliance, but of the day his nerves, and his nerve, finally failed him. Carla Rossi's fall was quieter but no less absolute. Her authority, built on fear and intimidation, evaporated overnight. The nursing staff, who once scurried to obey her every command, now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. She was the woman who had tried to sideline a miracle. Her presence in the cardiac ward became a source of deep embarrassment for the administration. Within 2 weeks, she was reassigned to the hospital's medical records department in the basement, a sterile, silent world of paperwork and filing cabinets. A fittingly invisible end for a woman who had been so blind. Dr. Evan Black faced a different kind of justice. He wasn't fired. In his terrified, post-operative debrief, he was brutally honest about his own paralysis and Anna's genius. Dr. Tanaka, impressed by this newfound humility, argued that the young man could still become a good doctor, perhaps even a great one, if the arrogance were stripped from him. The board agreed. Black was placed on strict probation, his residency extended by a full year, and he was required to attend mandatory behavioral counseling. The fast track he had been on was gone. He now had to walk the long, hard road of earning respect, not through sycophancy, but through genuine competence and character. In the days that followed, Anna became a reluctant legend. The billionaire father of the child she saved was a man of immense gratitude and influence. He made a $10 million donation to the hospital, endowing the Ana Oliveira Scholarship Fund for advanced nursing practice. The hospital administration, eager to capitalize on the good press and terrified of losing their newfound prodigy, offered her the world, a full, all-expenses-paid scholarship to their prestigious medical school, bypassing the usual application process, an immediate promotion to surgical consultant, a title they invented for her, a salary that tripled her current earnings. Mr. Henderson presented the offer to her himself in a small, private office, his voice oozing with a salesman's charm. Anna listened patiently, her hands folded in her lap. She was back in her standard-issue scrubs, her hair in its simple, functional bun. She looked exactly as she had before, as if the events of that day had left no visible mark on her. When he was finished, she looked at him, and for the first time, he realized her quietness was not a lack of confidence, but the presence of a deep, unshakable peace. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. That's a very generous offer," she said. "The scholarship fund is a wonderful idea. I'm glad it will help other nurses receive the training they deserve." She paused. "But I must decline the other offers." Henderson was stunned. "Decline? But this is the opportunity of a lifetime. You could be a surgeon." "You are a surgeon." "I am a nurse," Anna corrected him gently. "I saved that child as a nurse. My place is not in boardrooms or giving lectures. My place is with the patients. It's where I'm needed." And that was that. She didn't need their titles, their money, or their validation. She had never been seeking it. Her worth was not something that could be awarded or bestowed upon her, it was something she carried within herself, forged in years of silent, obsessive study and a profound dedication to her craft. The story ends not in a grand theater or a press conference, but weeks later, in the quiet of the hospital library late at night. Anna is there, sitting at a small table, a stack of advanced neurology textbooks beside her. A young, nervous-looking nursing student approaches her, hesitating. "Excuse me, are you Ana Oliveira?" the student asks, her voice full of awe. Anna looks up from her book and gives the student a warm, genuine smile. "I am," she says. "Can I help you with something?" Her life wasn't about the one day she was a god. It was about all the quiet days she was simply, and extraordinarily, a nurse. Anna's story is a powerful reminder that true value isn't measured by titles or the volume of applause, but by the quiet courage and skill that emerges when it's needed most. It's about the strength that so often goes unseen. Have you ever felt underestimated or witnessed someone completely defy expectations when the pressure was on? I believe we all have a story like that, a moment where a quiet hero stepped out of the shadows. Share your story in the comments below. Let's create a space to celebrate the hidden strengths we see in each other and in ourselves. If you were moved by Anna's journey, please hit that follow button and join our community. We're dedicated to sharing stories that inspire, empower, and remind us of the incredible potential that lies within us all. Thank you for being here.